Welcome back to Studio F, where on Fast Times with Willy B, I'll be ranking all 80 2023 new releases I watched this past year. Welcome back to Fast Times with Willy B, and today I'll be ranking all 80 new releases that I watched in 2023. At number 80, I got Slaughterhouse. Expected to go in this one, expecting dumb fun. It was just dumb. I hated everything about this movie. Horrible acting, horrible story. The storyline of the sloth made absolutely no sense, and it fell really flat for me. Found myself checking my phone a lot for this one, and was very disappointed in it, and it finds itself in 80th, last place for 2023. Moving on to 79th, this is where I've got Expendables 4. The first three Expendables are not horrible. I enjoyed especially the first two. The third one's still a lot of dumb fun. I didn't expect a lot from this one, but man, it was bad. Jason Statham was good. You know, you're going to get decent stuff from him, but outside of that, it was really bad. They brought Megan Fox in, didn't like her at all. Wasn't a great story. CGI was horrible. One of the worst movies of the year, and that finds itself in 79th. Coming in at 78th is Meg 2, The Trench. For Meg 2, again, expected this one to be dumb fun. The first Meg, not bad by any means, actually a very enjoyable movie. This one shouldn't even been called Meg. It should have been called Monsters of the Trench. Barely see sharks in this film until about the third act. You see a kraken, you see other, prehistoric monsters. You see dinosaurs more than you see sharks. It just was a poorly made movie. The lighting was terrible. Anytime they were underwater, you couldn't even see what was going on. But again, Jason Statham delivered on some fun action. Outside of that, there was not a lot of redeeming qualities with Meg 2, The Trench, and that's why it found itself at 78th. Moving on to 77th is Blue Beetle. For me, Blue Beetle, I didn't have super high expectations going into it, but I thought it would be good, especially with the early reception it received. For me, not good. Probably the worst superhero movie I've ever watched. I'd go as far to say that. There was some good acting, but there was a lot of bad. Susan Sarandon looked like she didn't even want to be there. Just for me, it fell really flat. Not a storyline I really wanted to follow. It took a lot of tropes from other superhero movies, and it just didn't work. It just wasn't for me, and Blue Beetle was actually one of the biggest flops of the year for me. Moving on to 76th, I have Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. You hear that title, and obviously you don't expect a great movie by any means. It was fun, but it was really bad. The looks of Winnie the Pooh and Piglet were kind of odd, but, you get the gore factor that you expect with this one. Horrible acting. Obviously, this is a B movie, and I know the people that made this are trying to do more, taking, childhood projects and turning them into horror movies. I don't know if that's the right route to go, but Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey was not very good, but it was still enough fun to watch it at least once. Moving on to 75th, I've got Doggone. You got Rob Lowe in this one, so a Netflix original. You don't know what to expect here, but it doesn't really reinvent the dog movie in any way. It's the same old story. Took from Homeward Bound in the sense that the dog runs away, but it just wasn't for me. Pacing was an issue in this one. Again, found myself checking my phone a lot watching Doggone. Not a good one for Netflix originals, and it just fell flat for me and landed in 75th for the year. Moving on to 74th, I've got Inside. This is a movie where you really only see Willem Dafoe, and the only other cast is through the phone or stuff like that. Usually when you have Willem Dafoe on screen, it's usually a really good movie, but for this one, it was just really boring. Not much of a captivating story. Again, another one where I found myself checking my phone a lot. This was a streaming movie, but it just wasn't for me. Kind of a cool concept, a guy going to rob a house, gets trapped inside the house, but I just thought it was done poorly, and again, like I said, it wasn't for me. Moving on to 73rd, we have A Ghost. Was excited for this one in the sense that David Harbour was in it. Always excited to see him on screen. This was another streaming original, I believe Netflix. And it just seemed like maybe if I was 10 years younger or even 15 years younger, I would have really enjoyed this. But it didn't seem like a movie for adults or more. It was pretty cheesy. And all in all, again, just another boring run at a ghost story for kids. Kind of like Haunted Mansion without the pizzazz. But it wasn't for me. Again, We Have a Ghost falls at 73rd. Moving on to 72nd, I have Fingernails. This was an Apple TV Plus original. Had a lot of high hopes going into this one. Jeremy Allen White was in it. Jessica Buckley. Decent cast. A cool premise. They can figure out who's in love by taking their fingernails and putting them through this machine. But it was just another movie that the entire runtime just seemed to drag on. Was not for me. Didn't have fun at all. Super boring. There were some strong romantic elements to it, but it just didn't have anything to captivate me enough to put it higher than where I have it. Again, was kind of excited for this one, but kind of a letdown. Moving on to 71st, I have Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, and this is another superhero movie that I was mightily disappointed in. Didn't expect it to be nearly as good as the first Aquaman, but was expecting more from James Wan. It just was super uninspired. It seemed like the DCEU knew they were done, so they're like, let's just put this out. Who cares? And it was really sad to see the DCEU end on this note. I know I'm not the only one that felt that way. I know a lot of people hate this movie. And as you saw in my review, if you want the full review, you can see it. But it was not a good film at all. Super boring, especially for a superhero action movie. You hate to see it be that boring. Bad CGI. Acting was hit or miss. Amber Heard was horrible. And for me, it falls at 71st. Moving on to 70th, I have House Party, a remake of the House Party movies from the 90s. This was, almost a shot-for-shot remake, it felt like, but with a lot more weird. Kid Cudi was in it. Super, super weird character. They're having a party in LeBron's house, which is cool and all. LeBron comes home and he challenges the guys that broke into his house to have a party to one-on-one on whether he should not press charges or not. And for me, that was never super realistic, obviously. I don't know. It just seemed like another one that LeBron was trying to throw on his resume, a little comedy action, but to me, it wasn't funny at all. Coming in at 69th is Murder Mystery 2. The first Murder Mystery is just as bad as the second one. Both Netflix originals, both Adam Sandler, Jennifer Aniston movies. When I saw the second one was coming out, I was like, you know what, I'll give these both a try. Like Sandler, like Aniston. Just both, again, whodunits that were super predictable. That's always bad when you're watching a whodunit if it's predictable. But it just didn't do anything to reinvent the wheel as far as whodunit goes. And it definitely wasn't the funniest I've ever seen from Adam Sandler or Jennifer Aniston. All in all, it led to a pretty boring watch, and it led itself to 69th place. Coming in at 68th is 65. I know missed opportunity there to put it in 65th place, but I was excited for this one. Double featured this one with Scream 6 when it came out in theaters. Adam Driver in it. Big dinosaur guy. Dinosaurs and sharks being my favorite animals. The dinosaurs looked good. The movie looked good. Like it was, technically well done. Just didn't have a story. It was almost storyless. It was a hard story to follow, and it didn't do anything for me at the end of the day. Not very entertaining. It's pretty boring, and because of that, it finds itself down far on this list. Coming in at 67th, I have You People. This one had moments where it was very funny. That gave it a notch up on this list. It just still, at the end of the day, wasn't a great story, and it was super unrealistic, but Jonah Hill, Eddie Murphy both delivered on some comedy here and there and made it a good enough watch once. This will be another one I will never revisit, but a Netflix original that was just meh. Coming in 66th is Pet Sematary Bloodlines. This is another one that I didn't know how I felt going into it. Obviously, I loved the first Pet Sematary film, but like they say in the movie, sometimes dead is better, and maybe they should have listened to that quote themselves when making more movies for this franchise. I don't hate the 2019 remake, but, they go the prequel route, and I was kind of excited for it, and they just did it really poorly. It kind of ruined the 2019 movie in a sense, and it just wasn't done well at all. A very quick movie. I believe it was an hour and 20, so it was a quick watch, but I just was hoping for a lot more than what I got from Pet Sematary Bloodlines. Moving on to 65th, I have Suitable Flesh. This was one I didn't really know much about going into. This was one that I had to rent on Amazon Prime, but we gave it a shot because it was receiving decent enough scores. Um, just another one that wasn't for me. Heather Graham was good, but it was a story that was super weird. The pacing was horrible. It would have moments where it felt like the scene was going on forever, and then it would have scenes that I felt like didn't get just due. A movie that, with a couple, things here and there changed, it could have been a really good film, but it just, at the end of the day, fell flat, especially on the pacing side of things, and because of that, it found itself in 65th place. Coming in 64th, I have Strays. This was a comedy that, there was a lot of funny stuff in it, but at the end of the day, it was really dumb. There's some sad elements to it. It's definitely better than Doggone in the sense of dog movies. The voice acting was great, don't get me wrong there, but it just wasn't enough for me to put it higher on this list. Like I said, it was funny at moments, but it was one of those comedy movies that was dumb more than funny. Coming in 63rd place, I have Fast X. I think the whole Fast and Furious franchise is pretty cheesy at times. There are some movies I really enjoy. I love the 5th installment. I enjoy the 8th installment. Mostly when The Rock comes around is when I really start enjoying these films, but kind of falls off a cliff once it hits the 9th and they go to space. The 10th is kind of in the same boat. This movie would have been a lot lower for me if Jason Momoa wasn't in it. Jason Momoa killed it. I thought he was a great villain. I am kind of excited to see what he does in future films as far as the Fast franchise goes. I hate saying that because this franchise probably should have been over a few movies ago, but anyway, if we're going to get more, let Jason Momoa be in them because Jason Momoa is the best part of this film. Moving on to 62nd, I have Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. This was actually one of the more disappointing films of the year for me. I had a lot of hope going into this one. Obviously, the first three Indiana Jones movies being phenomenal movies. The fourth one, not bad, but probably not good either. It's still enjoyable enough. I was excited for this one, see what Harrison Ford did, older age, see what he brings back to the Indiana Jones character. I know he loves this character, but it was not for me. I hated the time travel element. Some people will like this movie, but for me, it wasn't great. I thought the CGI was spotty at parts. It just didn't look good. It was kind of long. The pacing was not great either. A lot could have been cut out of this movie, and a lot could have been changed with this movie. But for me, it was not good. In 61st, I have Priscilla. This was another one that did really well, seeing great scores when it first came out. But for me, I was upset because we didn't learn a thing about Priscilla. You can check out my full review on this movie. It was actually my first full review on this channel. But Priscilla was a letdown in the sense that it was a movie that was super repetitive. They were having fun. Elvis would do something stupid. Priscilla would get mad. Elvis would apologize. Restart. It did that over and over. We didn't learn a thing about Priscilla. I wanted a lot more from this movie than I got. Definitely not nearly as good as the Elvis biopic we got in 2022. But if you're looking for a good score and a good aesthetic, this movie has that. It is visually stunning and obviously a score that doesn't really include Elvis, surprisingly. Blew me away. A score and a soundtrack, I should say. A lot of commercialized music in this one that I loved. But outside of that, again, not a movie for me. In 60th, I have Zoe 102. This was actually a surprise for me. I did not expect this movie to be good at all. And I'm not saying it was good either. It was definitely, all right. It was decent. But I was surprised by, how much emotional pull this movie had. It looked good. Obviously, as a Zoe 101 fan, being born in the late 90s and watching that show growing up, getting to see the whole cast back together obviously adds to the nostalgic value for me. But at the end of the day, I enjoyed this movie more than I hated it. It was actually a fun watch that me and my fiance had together. And it's not high on this list by any means. It's in 60th place, but a lot higher than I expected it to be at the end of the day. In 59th, I have Infinity Pool. For me, this one was good and bad. It was a really cool concept, but I just found myself bored at some moments. I couldn't stand Mia Goth in this one. I didn't like her voice. And, Mia Goth has killed it, especially with X and Pearl. Excited to see what she does with Magazine. Excited to see what she does with Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. But this one was definitely my least favorite performance of hers. Other cast members were great. I didn't think the acting was bad by any means. It just was a little annoying. It looked well, but it just was too weird for me, and which is crazy because I do like weird, but this was Cronenberg weird at its best. And I just, at the end of the day, it was not better than a lot of movies on this list. Coming in 58th, I have The Marvels. MCU kind of obviously in a lull. They had one great movie this year, which we'll get into later. But The Marvels for me was a movie that I went into with low expectations. And it was delivering for me for a while. I was really surprised with how much I was liking The Marvels in the first two acts, but the third act falls off a cliff. They go to this water planet, and they only speak the language of song. I did not like that at all. It did have a very forgettable villain as well, one of the worst in the MCU, and because of that, it just fell down on this list a bunch. Great performances from our top three members here, The Marvels, but at the end of the day, this movie wasn't good. Coming in 57th, I have Napoleon. This was a major letdown for me. This was a movie that I was super excited going into, expecting to see more war scenes than I did. When the teaser trailer is the best scene in the movie, that's always a letdown, because then they just showed you the best, and nothing can beat that. Joaquin Phoenix had a great performance, but we don't even get a French accent from him, and that was kind of, a letdown. But at the end of the day, a lot of people like this movie. A lot of people hate this movie. The pacing's a little odd. It is a little boring at moments. But when Napoleon is in war, this movie is at its best. I think that it should have had more war scenes. And I think it would have made the movie a heck of a lot better. But it goes more on the relationship side of things for Napoleon with his wife, making a family. And I think that's where they lost me. I wasn't expecting that, and it was a letdown. Coming in at 56th, I have Renfield. I had a lot of fun with Renfield. Not the greatest movie, at the end of the day, but Nicholas Hoult and Nicolas Cage were a lot of fun in this one. It's definitely worth the watch. Not high up my list for the year, but I would say this is the definition of dumb fun, is the movie Renfield. Coming in 55th, I have The Equalizer 3. This was another letdown for me. The first two Equalizers, I absolutely love those movies, especially the first one. And this one, it's just pacing issues. There's a lot of bland scenes, a lot of stuff that could have been cut out, honestly, and it would have made this one a lot better. When there's action going on, the action's great, choreographed great, but there could have been more of that, less of the boring stuff, and honestly, it just dragged on a little bit longer than I expected. I still enjoyed this movie. Just definitely a letdown after the first two Equalizers. Coming in 54th, I have Anyone But You. This was a rom-com that didn't really do anything to reinvent the wheel as far as rom-coms go, but it hit a lot on the comedy. Glenn Powell was fantastic. Sydney Sweeney had her moments where she struggled on screen, in my opinion, but when she was on screen with Glenn Powell, the dynamic was really good. I hated the third act, but outside of that, this was a really good movie, especially for the first two acts. If the third act didn't fall off, this one would have been a lot higher on this list, but still, worth the watch. Anyone But You almost felt like an early 2000s rom-com, and it was fun to see that again in theaters. Coming in at 53rd is No One Will Save You. This was an interesting film, an alien film that had 1 star in the film, and she doesn't really have any lines. I think she has less than 10 words spoken in the movie. The aliens look awesome. I think the not talking kind of took away from the film for me, but it was still a really cool concept. It was done well. It looked good. Basically shot at her house the entire movie. I just think that adding maybe one more character might have made this one a little bit better for me, to add kind of a dynamic with somebody. But at the end of the day, I still enjoyed it enough. And, the top 53, it sounds like, is a lot of movies, but this is where, a lot of the movies start turning really good for me. Coming in at 52nd, I have A Haunting in Venice. The third movie in this trilogy of whodunits. Kenneth Branagh directing all of them and also playing the lead character. And it's the best of the three, I would say, as far as my opinion goes. The first two, not predictable. I wouldn't say they're predictable. They just, were a lull at moments. This one, definitely faster paced. A star-studded cast, a great cast in this one. And honestly, the ending is super unpredictable in this one. And it's a beautiful movie to watch. Absolutely beautiful. But A Haunting in Venice is a movie that could, depending on the day when I wake up, jump up on this list, move down on this list, but right now it sits at 52nd. Coming in 51st, I have Haunted Mansion, a remake of Disney's original Haunted Mansion. Eddie Murphy not in this one, but a star-studded cast. Loved Owen Wilson, among others. This one I went and saw with my family. Some little kids too in my family went and saw this with us, and honestly, a little bit scary for little kids. It had me at moments at 24 years old, had me jumping. Jared Leto did a really good job as the main ghost in this film, but I honestly enjoyed this Haunted Mansion movie a lot more than the original, which isn't usually how it goes with Disney remakes. But Haunted Mansion was a fun watch. But it's Haunted Mansion at the end of the day, and there's a lot of movies this year were better than it. Now we'll go into the top 50. Coming in 50th, I have Megan. This was the first movie of 2023 that I watched. A lot of people compare it to Chucky. You have your doll killing people out of trying to protect in quotation marks. Its owner of this little girl, and the only difference between this and Chucky is Megan is definitely a lot more cheesy. You see her dance, you see her sing Titanium to make the little girl go to sleep. A weird choice of a bedtime story, but at the end of the day, it was still a lot of fun. There were some creative and unique on-screen kills, but it wasn't enough for me to be high on this list, but it was still worth the watch, and I was okay with that being the first movie to kick off my new year. Moving on to 49th, I have The Boogeyman. This was another one that I had a lot of expectations going into, and I was not let down by any means. I expected to be good, and it was good. A decent cast, a scary film, definitely the best Boogeyman movie we've gotten. The 2000 Boogeyman movies are pretty bad, but this one, it's nothing groundbreaking, nothing earth-shattering, but it's a fun movie, a scary movie, and it will make you jump. Definitely worth the watch, and yeah, The Boogeyman, solid film. Moving on to 48th, I have A Man Called Otto. Tom Hanks in this one was phenomenal. Just for me, it was almost, a family Gran Torino. Just the grumpy old man helps the other family out in different ways. This one definitely really sad, suicide undertones to it. A very sad film. I think the sadness kind of ruined it for me because it was a happy film for the most part, but it just breaks your heart, especially at the end. And nonetheless, it's still a good movie. And shout out to Tom Hanks for a powerful performance as far as showing the emotion of an old man. Moving on to 47th, I have The Pale Blue Eye, Christian Bale in this one. The story of Edgar Allan Poe, basically a murder mystery. This one was weird at moments, but I actually really enjoyed this film. It did have pacing issues, was a little longer than I think it needed to be, but a great aesthetic. It uses, the cool blues and grays very well. It's aesthetically pleasing on the eyes. Christian Bale was awesome. Supporting cast was great. And all in all, I was really happy with this watch. A Netflix original came out very early in the year as well. And this is definitely one I'd revisit down the road. It falls in 47th place. Moving on to 46th, I have Shazam! Fury of the Gods. I enjoyed both Shazam movies. I would say they're two of my favorite from the DCEU. I enjoyed this film a lot. You get the family back together for some more shenanigans. The ending is a lot better than I think in the first one. All in all, as far as superhero goes, it hits on most things you look for. And it was just a fun time. Shazam! Fury of the Gods was a fun time, and it was not the greatest theater experience because there's a lot of kids in my theater, but it didn't kill it. It was still a good watch. Coming in 45th, I have Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I know for a lot of people, this movie was a major letdown, and it was definitely a letdown for myself as well, but I still enjoyed it more than most. It seemed when Paul Rudd and Jonathan Majors weren't on screen, it was but whenever you had those two on the screen, the dynamic was great, the action was great. Don't know how to feel about the ants overtaking Kang. It's sad to see a guy like Jonathan Majors, who has so much talent, kind of ruin his life, but we get him in this one. It's good enough for me. I enjoyed it. I love the character of Ant-Man. I love Paul Rudd. I think that's the perfect casting, and this movie was enough for me to enjoy it. Moving on to 44th, I have The Nun 2. The first Nun was, when I watched the first Nun the first time, I hated it. I watched it again before this film. I liked it a little bit more. But The Nun 2 was a lot better for me. I really enjoyed The Nun 2. A lot of great jump scares, a much better story. Obviously, the nun, Valak, is the scariest character in the Conjuring universe, in my opinion. So anytime you have her in a movie, there's going to be some horror that gets me good, and it got me. The ending scene is great with how they, defeat the nun. And all in all, I was very happy with the second installment of this awesome character that the Conjuring universe created. Coming in 43rd, I have Five Nights at Freddy's. One of the worst theater experiences I've ever had. This was a Peacock release and a theater release. And me and my buddy Corey decided to go and watch it in theaters. And it was a bunch of high school kids who just talked the entire film. But it wasn't enough to kill the movie for me. Five Nights at Freddy, I wouldn't say is like groundbreaking again for horror. I know it broke a lot of records. It has a huge following, but it's still a lot of fun. It's more of a fun horror movie, and it's got some fun on-screen kills. Matthew Lillard's back. Anytime Matthew Lillard's in horror, you're going to have a fun time. I thought Hutcherson had a great performance in this one as well. And all around, I was very happy with the Five Nights at Freddy's we got. I've never been the biggest follower of Five Nights at Freddy's, so some of the things that the kids in the theater reacted to, I had no idea what was going on in that sense, but being a basic knowledge guy as far as Five Nights at Freddy's go, it was still an enjoyable movie. Moving on to 42nd, I have No Hard Feelings. This one surprised me. I didn't expect a lot from this one. I thought it was going to be, again, another dumb comedy, but this one was actually really funny. A really good story. You get to see Matthew Broderick as a Ferris Bueller fan. That was awesome. Jennifer Lawrence did a phenomenal job as this babysitter girlfriend type of character that is, tasked with going on a date, going all the way with this, not kid, he's, over 18, he's an adult, but he's awkward, he's weird, and so she's tasked with that, and in return, they'll pay her with a car. A cool, stupid concept, but it was cool, fun, and it was hilarious. It was a hilarious watch. And Jennifer Lawrence, this is one of my favorite performances of her, honestly, and it's crazy to see that in a comedy element. Coming in 41st, I have Insidious: The Red Door. This one was a really fun watch. I actually wish this movie was longer. I enjoyed the entire runtime of this film, but I thought the ending was cut short. I wanted to see more with, the Red Devil that we saw from the first one coming back, making an appearance. I thought Ty Simpkins, all grown up, was phenomenal in this film. Obviously, Patrick Wilson was great, but I wanted to see a little more. I still enjoyed it. One of my favorites in the Insidious franchise. Outside of the last key, I enjoy all of the Insidious franchise, and this was another good installment in that great horror franchise. Moving on to 40th, I have The Exorcist Believer. I was surprised by this film. I didn't have high expectations going into it. I knew some major people from the original were going to make some returns. David Gordon Green in the director's chair. I know a lot of people loved the first of the Halloween trilogy he did, and then it kind of fell off for people. I enjoyed the first and third movie a lot. Halloween Kills could have been a little bit better for me, but I thought he did a great job here with Exorcist Believer. You could tell that it was a David Gordon Green film. Just the cinematography, the aesthetic, the shots. I really liked the fall feel to this film, and getting to see this the first week of October, the second week of October, just fit the aesthetic perfectly, and I was really happy with what the first movie in this what's supposed to be a trilogy coming out with David Gordon Green did. Hopefully David Gordon Green can keep it going. I know he kind of fell off in the Halloween franchise for a lot of people, like I said earlier, but I hope he can keep this rolling. I really enjoyed this first Exorcist movie of his. Coming in at 39th is Saw 10. This is a Saw movie that I really enjoyed. I watched all of the Saw movies before this because I'd never seen them before, and a lot of them obviously were just repetitive. There are a few good movies in the franchise, but this movie had, I think, one of the better stories in a Saw movie, with kind of the revenge story with the doctors not curing his cancer. It was really cool, really gory. There's an emotional connection when they bring a kid in. It's just a Saw movie that kind of went all in, and I was really happy with what I saw. Tobin Bell was great again. Obviously, you couldn't imagine anybody else in that role, and it was a fun movie to watch. and I really enjoyed it. Moving on to 38th, I have Bottoms. There are some glaring flaws with this film, but it's still a fun enough time to look past those. I hate just about everybody on the football team, but Rachel Sennett and Io Berry, they're great in this movie, great dynamic. Obviously, best friends in this film, you kind of have to create a good dynamic, and they killed it. Marshawn Lynch was great in this film, hilarious as the advisor of their fight club. Not nearly as good, obviously, as David Fincher's Fight Club, but a fun comedic twist on his film, and at the end of the day, I found myself really enjoying this movie a lot more than I thought I would. Now we move to 37th, and it's crazy to think that this is 37th because my top 37 are all 8 out of 10s or better. This has been a great year for cinema, I have to say that, but in 37th I have Gran Turismo. Obviously, based on a true story, Archie Madekwe, this was really the first film I watched of his. He was great in the lead role. We get Orlando Bloom back. He did great as a supporting character. David Harbour was great, just obviously great acting. It looked gorgeous. It was aesthetically pleasing. Not really a story for me. I've never been a big Gran Turismo racer. I went with my brother who has played the game forever and he loved it. But for me, it was still a great movie. I'm glad I went and saw it, and it honestly shocked me because I wasn't expecting much from it. Moving on to 36th, I have Killers of the Flower Moon. This will probably catch a lot of hate being this low on my list. It was just pacing. 3.5 hours was way too long. The story was captivating. The performances were phenomenal. You know, you obviously, when you get Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, you're expecting great things. You get Martin Scorsese in the director's chair. It's going to be great. Lily Gladstone was awesome. I hope she gets a little recognitions when it comes to award season. But at the end of the day, it was way too long. And I just found myself checking my phone in theaters, which I rarely do. It's just, there was a lot that I felt like could have been cut out with this film. And the crazy part is I felt like the ending was rushed in a 3.5 hour runtime. Now, like I said, pacing is definitely an issue, but this was still an awesome movie. Technically stunning. The score was out of this world. I'm glad I went and saw this, but I definitely don't think it's Martin Scorsese's best like some people do, and I don't think it's Leo's best like some people do, but I still really enjoyed this film. I would even say I loved it. I just wish it would have been a little bit shorter. Moving on to 35th, I have The Flash. That's where I'm going to catch even more hate, is having this movie above Killers of the Flower Moon. But for me, well-paced movie. Loved seeing Michael Keaton back in the Batman suit. This one was choreographed really well. I know it had CGI issues. It definitely did. And that's kind of what brought it down for me. Because if it weren't for those CGI issues, I think this would have been a lot higher. I think this was the best Flash we've gotten on the big screen. And it kind of makes you sad. That you don't know what's going to happen with Flash going forward. But at the end of the day, this was a great movie. I wish the DCEU was sent off with this movie rather than Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, because I thought it would have been a much better send-off. But with that being said, The Flash was a great movie in my opinion. Moving on to 34th, I have Hell House LLC Origins, The Carmichael Manor. The first 3 Hell House LLCs, not the greatest trilogy. The first Hell House LLC is awesome. The second and third fall off a cliff for me. This 4th installment, didn't even know it was coming out until about 2 days before it came out. The first 30 minutes when they're giving background info can be a little dry, but once they get into the scares and the Carmichael Manor, this is up there as far as scary movies go. Super scary. You know, they bring the clown back that terrorized us in the first few movies, and he does just that. They have people in the woods that are scary. It's just all around this group of 3 being terrorized in this manner, and it has you sitting on the couch with your feet up because you don't want anything under the couch to grab your feet. It's that type of scary. I'm really happy that we last minute watched this one, me and my buddies, and it was a good watch. If you haven't seen the Hell House LLC movies yet, even though the second and third ones aren't that great, I definitely say you give all 4 movies a chance. Stephen Cognetti made a fun 4 movies. Even the second and third ones, albeit cheesy, still have scary elements to it. But yeah, Hell House LLC Origins was a lot of fun. Glad I watched that one. Moving on to 33rd, I have Creed 3. Michael B. Jordan takes on the director's chair. I thought he did a great job. I thought Michael B. Jordan and Jonathan Majors had great dynamic here. Again, Jonathan Majors, a great performance here. It's a letdown with what's going on with him. But this movie, not my favorite Creed movie, but I would put it above Creed 2. I don't know how I felt about the cage and the final battle. I think Rocky definitely had better final battle scenes, but it was still a great time. The realism wasn't there, but it was, you know, it's a boxing movie at the end of the day. It's a comeback movie at the end of the day, and it was a lot of fun. And like I said, the performances were great. It was shot very well, and a decent soundtrack as well. Creed 3 was all around a really fun movie to watch. Coming in 32nd, I have The Killer. When you think of suspense, David Fincher is one of the first directors that comes to mind. One of my favorite directors. This one follows Michael Fassbender's character, The Killer, and he is an assassin, makes a mistake, shoots the wrong person, and now he has to clean it up by going after people that are going to come after him. Very fun, movie to follow along with a sociopath. Look into the mind. We get these monologues from Fassbender that are really cool to see into the mind of this, sniper assassin. Great choreographed fights. He has a fight with the Brute that will make you wince when it happens. There's a certain thing that happens that's like, ugh. But nonetheless, it's awesome. Tilda Swinton's in it. She's in it very minimally, but while she's in it, it's very impactful. And all around, just a great movie. David Fincher does it again. He doesn't really miss, let's be honest. David Fincher's the man. Moving on to 31st, I have Maestro. Bradley Cooper directed and Bradley Cooper led. This movie, I think the biggest flaw with its pacing, but at the end of the day, it's still a very heartwarming movie. Sad towards the end as well. There's a lot of great quotes, a great score. Some also thrown in some commercial music in there. That's a lot of fun. Some REM, some Tears for Fears. But Bradley Cooper, you can tell, poured his heart out into this one. He was great as the lead. He was great as the director. And this one, at the end of the day, was just a great movie. Coming in 30th, I have Transformers Rise of the Beasts. This one surprised me. I watched all the Transformer movies before this one came out because I couldn't remember which ones I had seen or not. And I would say this is my second favorite in the franchise behind Bumblebee. Really enjoyed Bumblebee, but Transformers Rise of the Beasts, as far as stories go, one of the best in the franchise. I thought it felt the most like the cartoons, and I thought we got the best Transformers that we've seen on screen as a collective group. Obviously, Bumblebee mainly focusing on Bumblebee. This one as a group, I loved Pete Davidson as Mirage, and I thought it was great acting all around, aesthetically pleasing, and the final battle was badass. Moving on to 29th, I have Dark Harvest. This is a movie that a lot of people probably didn't watch this year. It came straight to VOD. I watched it on Amazon Prime with some buddies around Halloween, and we were all very into this movie. A cool concept. This Sawtooth Jack character comes back every year, and all of the seniors in high school have to kill him, or he will take the crops for the entire year. Like I said, it's a weird premise, but when you really dive into it, I'm very happy this film got to be made because it's an original story. It was cool. Sawtooth Jack looked scary. The acting wasn't bad. There was one actor that I just couldn't stand, but outside of that, very well acted, very well paced, and this movie drilled the aesthetic of Halloween on the nose. This is a Halloween movie. I've been a big advocate saying we need more Halloween movies, not, Halloween like John Carpenter's Halloween, but like just Halloween movies. We have Christmas movies for every day of the year. I want to see more Halloween movies, and Dark Harvest delivered on that for me. Moving on to 28th, I have It's a Wonderful Knife, another holiday slasher film. This one, obviously, Christmas themed. Justin Long, phenomenal. Cast had its moments, but this one was a fun story playing off the trope of It's a Wonderful Life. Our main character, wishes she was never born after she kills the killer. And because of that, the killer's back terrorizing the town, and nobody knows who she is. It's a fun ride, great dynamic between our two main characters here. And I probably like this one a lot more than most because it does have cheesy elements, but I really enjoyed It's a Wonderful Knife, and it was a great theater experience for me. Coming in 27th, I have yet another holiday slasher, and that's where I have Thanksgiving. Patrick Dempsey's in this one. He really, puts in a great performance, kind of revitalizing things. You see him in the Scream franchise. Get to see him again in a slasher film, which is really cool. Addison Rae's in it, her group of friends. Really cheesy at the beginning. The beginning is only the really bad part of this film, with the Black Friday shopping and everything like that. But, we have a Black Friday massacre, and this Thanksgiving character, John Carver, comes back with vengeance over who participated or was a part of the massacre at this, it's basically like a Save Mart. But at the end of the day, it was a fun movie. As far as kills go on screen, if you're a fan of slashers, this movie has a lot of creative ones, very creative ones, that are Thanksgiving themed, like cooking somebody like a turkey. All in all, this was a really fun slasher, and I really enjoyed it. And this will be one that I revisit every Thanksgiving. Keeping it with slashers, coming in at 26th, I have Totally Killer. This was Back to the Future meets Scream. I like this one a lot. Obviously, as somebody who loves the 80s, the aesthetic was immaculate. When she is forced to go back in time to protect her mom and group of friends from the Sweet 16 killer, the feel of the 80s was spot on. They did a great job with that. Cinematography was great. And honestly, it was a very captivating story. I went into this one with low expectations. It was an Amazon Prime original, and it blew me away. I really, really enjoyed this movie. One of my favorite movies of the month of October. And, it just missed out on the top 25 for 2023, but it's right there. Great movie, and I hope a lot of people give this movie a chance. Coming in 25th, I have Dungeons & Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves. This one is a fun ride. I started playing D&D last year. When you know what's going on, it kind of enhances the watch experience. You got Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, everybody really turning in great performances. It's just an adventure film. You go on an adventure with this group like you are in the D&D group, and you watch them on their quests. And it's a lot of fun. I had so much fun with this one. I actually watched it twice this year, once the day it came out and the second time being in a drive-in. And it's a movie that I'll probably revisit several times. It was a lot of fun, and that's all I can say about it. It's a lot of fun. Moving on to 24th, I have Wonka. Timothée Chalamet was fantastic in this film. This film was fun because we get really our first innocent Wonka. With Johnny Depp and Gene Wilder, he has his weird and murderous things going on, but this one, it's before he even has the chocolate factory. Timothée Chalamet did a great job playing an innocent Wonka. It's almost a steampunk feel to it. It feels like Fantastic Mr. Fox in the sense that you've got three big bads going after one guy, and they team up together, even though they are, at the end of the day, competitors in the chocolate business. But it's a lot of fun. It's whimsical. That's what it is. It's whimsical. It's a whimsical watch, and I'd put it second as far as Wonka movies go. I actually have it ahead of the Johnny Depp one, but below the Gene Wilder, the original. But this is one that I will revisit. I went and saw it with my fiance in theaters. We had a great time. It's funny, it's lighthearted, and it's just a fun story to follow along. Moving on to 23rd, I have Tetris. This is, a biography basically on how Tetris, the rights to Tetris, were earned for worldwide selling of the video game, the arcade machine, and so on and so forth. This movie, I didn't expect to have so much action, and when you find out it's based on a true story, it's kind of crazy. Getting obviously in the 80s when the Cold War was going on, and a guy from Russia is who created Tetris. Getting the rights was more than just, sign on the dotted line. There was political pull to it, and seeing all of that was insane for just this video game, and obviously seeing how Tetris has taken off and what it is today and where it is at in sales for video games makes a lot of sense on why it was such a fight for the rights. But it's a really, really cool story. Great score, or soundtrack, I should say. If you love the 80s, you'll love this soundtrack. And it's just a fun ride. There's transitional scenes that are in 8-bit that are really cool. I love the look of this movie. This one was actually an Apple TV Plus streaming one as well. And I watched this one actually right before the year ended, and it was a very pleasant surprise. But if you haven't already, check out Tetris. A great watch. Moving on to 22nd, I have Cocaine Bear. This was a movie I went into expecting to have fun, but I actually didn't expect the story and writing to be as well as it was. We get great performances, great writing, a captivating story, and a lot of gore too. If you're into gore, Cocaine Bear provides it. This one is another one that I will definitely revisit down the road. Cocaine Bear is just a lot of fun, and who wouldn't want to watch a bear on cocaine? It's buck wild, and like I said, great performances across the board. It's just a good time. Moving into 21st, I got The Last Voyage of the Demeter. I didn't like how this one ended with almost, showing that's going to have a sequel, because this movie was so well done on its own. It's a movie that takes place solely on this ship that a vampire is terrorizing. The vampire, Dracula. And Corey Hawkins playing our main lead. He did a great job. just following this story where this vampire is picking off the crew one by one and nobody knows who it is. Everybody thinks it's the stowaway, this lady that they found down in the storage room, and she's almost seen as this devil figure, and people are like, it's her ever since she's been on the boat. People are going down one by one, but it's the whole time this Dracula. And I love the use of the blues and the grays, especially when it takes place at night. I love the way they use lightning to light up Dracula. You don't really ever get to see him full on until closer to the end. And it's just a fun story to follow along with. And it is scary, too. It provided on the horror elements to it. I'd call it more of a thriller, but at moments that had you scared, there are some jump scares in it. The gore is good. The look of Dracula is great. And I would say this is one of the better vampire movies in my lifetime. Moving on to 20th, I have Asteroid City. Wes Anderson is the man. I watched all of his films this year, some for the first time. Some I thought I'd seen most of, if not all of his movies, but there were some that I was like, yeah, I definitely hadn't seen this yet. But Asteroid City, I keep saying this, but a fun ride. A lot of these movies this year, 2023, did a really good job at storytelling, and right here, Asteroid City is just a fun story to follow along with. Obviously, when you get Wes Anderson in the director's chair, you know you're going to get that quirky movie, and you get it here. Jason Schwartzman is awesome, and Scarlett Johansson also in this one, great. A stacked cast. You get all around big names. I feel like the budget had to go mostly to the cast with how big it is, but it takes place in this, deserted area. An alien joins. Jeff Goldblum plays the alien. It's fun. It's cheesy, but at the end of the day, I loved it, and Wes Anderson hasn't made a bad movie in my opinion. Moving on to 19th, I have Knock at the Cabin. Knock at the Cabin for me is probably the most underrated film of the year. I feel like it's gotten a lot of mixed reviews from people, but I absolutely loved it. I think Dave Bautista shut up a lot of haters with this performance. I know a lot of people were saying Dave Bautista's comedy and superhero movies only, but in this one, he proved that he can play in a thriller. M. Night Shyamalan really impressed me. It seems like every other movie of his goes good, bad, good, bad. We got old a few years ago. Was not a fan of that, but love Knock at the Cabin. Great concept, end of the world, make a decision, and, it was epic. I loved it. The cast was great, and I'm really happy that I went and saw this one on opening night. I left the theater thinking about an 8.5, and it hasn't changed for me. The more I think on this movie, the more I want to watch it again, and Knock at the Cabin was up there with the best of them for 2023. Coming in at 18th, I have Talk to Me. Talk to Me was an interesting watch for me. I went to Talk to Me in between shifts almost, and I was the only one in the theater. It was a matinee showing, and I think that added a little extra layer of horror to it, honestly. This movie is kind of all over the place. It is scary. There are scenes that leave you with your jaw dropped. And at the end of the day, I loved everything about Talk to Me. I know they're already in the talks for Talk to Me 2, and it kind of makes me excited to see where they move on from what happened in the first film. But all in all, the kids on screen did a great job. Mostly all high schoolers and middle schoolers, and there's a lot of gore, and there's a lot of just shock factor to Talk to Me that I really enjoyed. Great job, and I love that they gave these two YouTubers a shot at making this film. You always love to see that, and they killed it. Moving on to 17th, I have John Wick Chapter 4. When you talk about fight choreography, this is right up there with it. Keanu Reeves, obviously, a cheesy actor. Let's be real. You love him, but he's not the greatest actor by any means. But when he turns in a John Wick performance, you love everything about it. Like I said, great fight choreography. I thought Bill Skarsgård was a great villain in this film, and it was cool to see, John Wick get his full circle moment following him for this 4-film franchise. And it's not over. There's more films coming in this franchise. They're doing spinoffs, and I'm excited to see them because everything they've done has been fun. You're going to get great action. You're going to get great fight sequences. And this movie, not only did you get epic battles, but you got an aesthetically pleasing look of a film. When it's in Japan, the neon lights, the reds, the blacks, then it turns to the blues and the oranges when it's there. It's everything about John Wick 4 was easy on the eyes, and it was a really easy watch. And I'd probably say it's my second favorite of the 4 John Wick movies behind the original. Moving on to 16th, this is where I have Oppenheimer. I know this is low on for most people's lists, I know a lot of people have this towards the top. For me, it was just the pacing. I still think this was a phenomenal movie. I thought Cillian Murphy killed it. I thought Emily Blunt was awesome. Just about everybody that was in this film was awesome. Christopher Nolan really blew me away with this film. When the nuke drops, one of the greatest scenes in cinema this year. Pacing for me was a little weird. Robert Downey Jr. will definitely be nominated for Best Supporting. Cillian Murphy, Best Actor. A lot of awards will probably be won with Oppenheimer. For me, it just fell a little short on the pacing thing. And honestly, it wasn't a story for me. It wasn't something that intrigued me 100%. But at the end of the day, I went and saw this film and still thought it was phenomenal. Moving on to 15th, this one will get last, putting it ahead of Oppenheimer, but I have the Super Mario Bros. Movie. This movie was made for me. A big, growing up playing Mario video games, you kind of get a little taste of everything in here with Mario Kart. You get some Smash in there. I thought the voice acting was great. I know Chris Pratt caught a lot of flack at the beginning, but I thought he did a great job as Mario. Charlie Day was the perfect Luigi. Anya Taylor-Joy was great as Peach. Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong. You get his laugh in it. That just makes it even better. And then Jack Black as Bowser, I thought was the best of them all. Jack Black as Bowser, his song Peaches, great original song. A little sad it didn't make the short list for the Academy Awards. But nonetheless, everything about Mario was just awesome. It was visually stunning. Illumination did a great job with the animation. And it was as fun as a Mario movie could have got. We get that 90s Mario movie that's obviously very lackluster, but this one is just so much fun. You get a little post-credit scene action, too, that makes you excited for a second one. And all in all, I was very happy that we finally got a Mario movie that I can watch on repeat. Coming in 14th, I have The Hunger Game, The Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes. This one, was a little long as well, but this is my favorite Hunger Games movie. It was really cool getting to see, how Snow started so innocently and then was corrupted by the games, and it made him the man we see in the first four Hunger Game films. But again, Viola Davis, great supporting character in this. Peter Dinklage, also great in this. All in all, great performances across the board. The soundtrack and score was awesome, and it's a really cool concept. It was also really cool getting to see the Hunger Games at the 10th annual. Jump back, with the retro fonts and the old feel. Jason Schwartzman is fun in this one, and all in all, I was really impressed with this one. I didn't have high expectations going into it, but like I said, it blew me away, and it's my favorite Hunger Games movie to date. Coming in at 13th, I have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem. What else can I say? This is my favorite TMNT movie. The animation style was awesome. They reference Ferris Bueller. You always get bonus points from me on that. I love that they went with kids for the voice acting because it makes them feel actually like teenagers. Honestly, the voice acting across the board was casted as perfect as I think it could have gotten. You get a great big bad in Superfly, and it's just a story to follow along very easily. Excited to see what they do in the second one. Obviously, we're going to get some Shredder, which will be awesome. But as far as this first one goes, I think they did a great job at showing what the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles actually are. I think this is the best depiction of them. And like I said, the animation style is aesthetically pleasing. And I can't forget to mention the soundtrack. 90s hip-hop at its best. They put together a great soundtrack that just feels like you're straight from the 90s. A Tribe Called Quest, Can I Kick It? And the credits rolling. Just a very aesthetically pleasing film, and I loved everything about TMNT Mutant Mayhem. Moving on to 12th, I have Scream 6. Super bummed to see what's going on with Scream 7. At this point, I just hope they scrap Scream 7, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Scream 6. Scream 6 was awesome. I loved the New York setting. I thought, obviously, our core four delivered another great performance. What Scream has done that other franchises have fallen short on is they've found another group that we can root for. It's a group in the core four that everybody kind of just liked. You grab onto them in the fifth installment, and you like them, you follow them, and they made cool connections, obviously, with two of them being related, and all of them being related to the original group, and somehow it's sad to see Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega obviously not on the next project, and like I said, it almost makes you just want them to scrap Scream 7 and maybe revisit it down the road. But what is going on is not fun. But Scream 6 for me was the second best Scream movie I've seen. This, I think stacks up the best to the first one. I think the first one will never be touched as far as what's the best Scream movie, but Scream 6 did a lot for me. I think the revealing was a little weak, but outside of that, the rest of the movie I loved. Moving on to 11th, I have Barbie. Barbie was a surprise this year. Another movie that I went in expecting dumb fun. Ryan Gosling blew me away. Margot Robbie was fantastic. I'm Just Ken better win Best Song at the Academy Awards since Peaches wasn't even nominated. It makes it a really easy choice for me. Obviously this one had strong undertones and a more meaningful meaning to it than just the comedy it had, but it was emotional, but also funny. I had a lot of fun with Barbie. It's a movie that I'll watch again. I'm not afraid to say that. Ryan Gosling is slowly becoming my favorite actor. He's been top 3 for a while now. Honestly, since 2016 with La La Land and Nice Guys, Ryan Gosling's just been shooting up my leaderboard as far as actors goes, and he turns in another great performance here with Ken. Michael Cera was awesome too. Got to give him a shout out as Alan, as a supporting character. Every time Michael Cera was on screen, it was hilarious. But this was one where I found myself laughing a lot more than I thought I would. Now we hit the top 10. Moving into 10th, I have Godzilla Minus One. This is a monster movie made with heart. This movie is in Japanese, so you have to read subtitles, but that didn't kill it for me. This is the first Godzilla movie with a story quite like this. It takes a lot from the original 1954 film, but still makes it its own. You could tell that Takashi Yamazaki poured everything he had in this film. You can tell it's a passion project, and I really enjoyed Godzilla Minus One. The character development is some of the best character development you get in any film, and it's a monster movie with a story. You go into a Godzilla movie expecting to see Godzilla terrorize the town, but this one, even when Godzilla wasn't on screen, you were captivated by our main character, Koichi, and his love interest, and how he's shunned by his people because he didn't finish his job as a kamikaze bomber, and then he gets his full circle moment, and everything about Godzilla Minus One is a tearjerker. It's a tearjerker. I know it's weird. You don't go into Godzilla expecting to cry, but you will cry in this one, and I loved everything Takashi Yamazaki did with Godzilla Minus One. Moving on to 9th, I have Poor Things, and when I said Infinity Pool was too weird for me, this one was weird, but it's a weird I liked. My favorite part of this film was the score. It's my score of the year. I hope it gets recognition at the Academy Awards. But Emma Stone also turns in what I think is her career best performance, which is crazy to say because she's obviously had a great career. But Yorgos Lanthimos creates this, odd world and uses different colors and different scenes. Goes from black and white to when she gets to travel the world, she sees color. And you get a great supporting cast too. Willem Dafoe is awesome as usual. Mark Ruffalo as this, love interest that kind of leads to his own undoing. It's a fun story to follow. Rami Youssef, another supporting character that did a great job in this film. And Poor Things, albeit super odd, there's a lot of, sexual scenes, but it's cool to see somebody as an adult with an infant brain grow up in the matter of years, and that's what you get with Emma Stone's character. You see her experience life as an adult, but with an infant brain. And, at the beginning of the movie, she's walking weird. She doesn't know how to say words. She learns, what an orgasm is she learns about making money and going to school and education. She starts to walk normal. It's really cool to see in 2 hours just the growth of this of this character. And this is another film just like Godzilla Minus One that has great character development. I think everybody across the board had a story that kind of came around and finished itself in a very awesome way. Moving on to 8th, I have Evil Dead Rise. Evil Dead Rise is easily my horror movie of the year. A lot of scary stuff. I think the biggest flaw with this film is how the book is found, but at the end of the day, it wasn't enough to kill it for me. I thought we get great performances here. The mom is nightmare fuel. You start getting scared of things that you wouldn't even know you were scared of, like, I don't know, a cheese grater, if that tells you anything. Now I have a fear of those. There's a lot of gore. You expect that with Evil Dead, but this one was awesome. I had high expectations going into this one, and it still blew me away. I was really happy with what I saw with Evil Dead Rise, and I'd go as far as to say as Evil Dead and Scream, in my opinion, are the two horror franchises that have kept on track the best. Moving on to 7th, I have Air. The story of the making of Michael Jordan's shoes. Never expected this to be turned into a movie, but we obviously, we get a great cast with Matt Damon, Jason Bateman, Ben Affleck, and they do a good job at representing what Nike really was. If you love the 80s, you'll love this film. That's what the entire soundtrack is, and as, an 80s fan, it blew me away. The first 5 minutes is an 80s montage of pop culture, which, was made for me, but this is another story that was a good time and interesting to really find out how things went with Nike from, how the slogan "Just Do It" was made to how they got Michael Jordan to sign on to Nike, making Nike what it is now. Moving on to 6th, I have Saltburn. This is another film that I throw in that category of weird, but Barry Keoghan, oh my gosh, I'll tell you what, he turns in a great performance. I love seeing him get bigger and bigger roles as his career goes on, because I think when he's on screen, he usually is one of the best doing it. He was awesome. Jacob Elordi, this is my favorite performance of his as well. Great cast. I wouldn't even say great cast. A lot of names unknown outside of those two, but great performances across the board. We get Archie Madekwe again from Gran Turismo. He's in this one in a supporting role. Another great soundtrack. Cinematography is gorgeous. It's aesthetically pleasing. The Saltburn house is awesome. And it's a story that's, interesting but scary at the same time. This guy is playing this entire family until each family member is dead one by one. And it leads to him running Saltburn. An outsider takes over the home. And I think the ending, albeit super weird, is one of the better endings of the year, and that is Barry Keoghan actually dancing around the house butt naked. And the reason I say it's one of the greatest endings of the year is because, his goal is to eliminate each family member one by one and take over this house. And let's be real, at the end of the day, if you took over this giant house that's secluded from everything, one of the first things you might do is dance around naked, and I just thought that was really cool that they threw that in. It's creative, in my opinion, and I thought Barry Keoghan was awesome. I'm, always interested to see what else he does next. Now to the top 5, moving on to 5th, I have Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I like this one a little bit more than Into the Spider-Verse. I think that this has a chance to be one of the greatest trilogies as far as comic book movies go. Beyond the Spider-Verse, obviously, coming out soon. I loved how this movie left us on a cliffhanger. I know that upset some people, but for me, I thought it was the best way to end it. It almost allows you to create an ending for it, or, build into this third movie and kind of see what they do with it. It's kind of cool. I loved the animation. Different animation styles. We get, Lego animation from a kid, which was awesome. When we're in Gwen's world, it's kind of like this water paint, watercolor, aesthetically pleasing greens and blues and purples and pinks. And then, we get the same animation style from Into the Spider-Verse when we're in Miles' world. And obviously, I loved Into the Spider-Verse's animation style to begin with. We get that again. I think we get a little bit of a better story. Miles finding out that he wasn't supposed to be Spider-Man is kind of like, it's crazy. It's a crazy story. It's a wild ride. He has, his conflicts with the other Spider-Mans. He has his conflicts with Gwen. He has his conflicts with his parents. And all around, you're just on the edge of your seat waiting to figure out how he's going to, resolve all these conflicts. And then, boom, the movie ends. And that's what I loved about this film is it builds you up. And then it doesn't let you go back down. And so at the end of this movie, I'm like, you're so amped. And I loved everything about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Getting to see all the different Spider-Man in one movie, then they're like, catch that Spider-Man, and you get the pointing. And it's just, they did fan service, but they did it so well as well that it doesn't even matter. And I loved everything about Across the Spider-Verse. Moving on to 4th, I have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This is my highest rated comic book movie of the year. As far as the Marvel Cinematic Universe goes, like I said earlier, kind of in a lull. This was a movie that gave the MCU hope. I would say this goes down as the greatest comic book trilogy to date, in my opinion. And like I said, Spider-Verse could pass it or come close to it, depending on what we get from Beyond. But Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, this was the perfect way to send off the Guardians group. A group that, when first announced, I was a little confused because, they weren't the big name comic book. A lot of people didn't know who the Guardians of the Galaxy even were. And they've just blown us away. James Gunn for 3 movies has blown us away. I'm excited to see what he does with DC going forward, but thank you, James Gunn, for sending us off with this. Like I said, favorite trilogy in the MCU, favorite trilogy in comic books, and the Guardians of the Galaxy are just a fun gang to hang out with. Chris Pratt as Star-Lord, Bradley Cooper as Rocket. This one has a huge emotional pull, especially from those two. You kind of get to find out more of Rocket's story and how he became Rocket Raccoon, and through that, him almost dying, Chris Pratt, his screams, everything about it. It makes you cry, it makes you smile. It has one of the best fight sequences in the MCU. 2, No Sleep Till Brooklyn by the Beastie Boys. It's all around just a great film. I have it high on my list when it comes to the MCU. I would go as far to say as this competes with the best of the best when it comes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I was very happy to see something like that when lately it hasn't been the greatest content coming out. Now to my top 3. At number 3, I have Dumb Money. This one was just dumb fun. Dumb Money is dumb fun with a great story, though. Great cast as well. Paul Dano in it. He did a great job in the lead role. Shailene Woodley, Nick Offerman, Seth Rogen, Pete Davidson, all in supporting roles. They were phenomenal as well. This is a movie you leave the theaters and you're looking at your buddies like, hey, you want to start a short squeeze? It's an inspiring story. It has elements of happiness, elements of sadness. It's a fun ride, and it was really cool learning more about this short squeeze that happened, in our lifetime. It was we were in high school when this came out, me and my friends, and, you don't really follow the stock market then, but getting to find out more now when you dabble in it here and there, it was a really cool story. And like I said, Paul Dano really killed it in the lead role, and anything he touches is usually gold. Moving to the second spot, I have The Holdovers. This is an instant holiday classic for this generation. The Holdovers is a Christmas movie at the end of the day. It just doesn't throw up green and red all over you. Or a sad watch. The best way to describe this film is, you go to your parents' house and your mom gives you a hug and says, let it all out while you're standing by the fire. It has that warmth, the warmth of the hug, but you're bawling your eyes out because you're just letting everything out. And that's what The Holdovers is. The Holdovers is a story of these kids that get left behind at boarding school over Christmas break, and Paul Giamatti's character is left with them as, their advisor. He's this grumpy old professor. And when the rest of the kids leave and Dominic Sessa's character is just left with Paul Giamatti and Divine Joy Randolph's character, who is the head chef, they all become unlikely friends. They all have these super sad backstories and super sad stuff going on in life. And to see them become unlikely friends is just, it tears your heart out, but then it comes back around and gives you a hug from behind. It's a super heartwarming story. A movie that feels like it's straight out of the 70s, the way it's shot. And everything about it, I loved. There is not a scene in this movie that shouldn't be there. And a great score, a great soundtrack, and just everything about it is so easy to watch. This is instantly a movie that I put on my watch list every year around November and December after watching it. I watched it twice this year. And moving on to number 1, I have The Iron Claw. Talk about heartbreak. One of the saddest stories in the history of ever. This movie follows the Von Erich wrestling family, one of the greatest families in wrestling, but the tragedy of heartbreak and losing loved ones almost, back to back to back. There's the story of 6 brothers, and 5 of them have died. Only 1 lives today. 4 of them died within 9 years of each other, and 1 of them wasn't even in the movie because Sean Durkin, the director, thought that would be overkill and too much heartbreak and it wouldn't feel real. And I agree. I thought Sean Durkin made a tasteful choice in not including that other brother because he's right. It would have just been too much. This movie in the first half is super lighthearted, super fun, showing what wrestling is about in the state of Texas in the 80s. And then in the second half of the movie, it's just all of this heartbreak and all of these brothers, passing one by one. You get great performances from everybody in this film. Zac Efron, in my opinion, best actor when it comes to 2023 with his performance here. Jeremy Allen White was great. Dickinson was great. Holt McCallany, Stanley Simons, all across the board, just great performances that they show emotion so strongly. And my favorite part of this film is the final 15-ish minutes when Carrie Von Erich, played by Jeremy Allen White, takes his life, and he's carried into the house by Kevin Von Erich, the only surviving kid, played by Zac Efron. And, Zac Efron hears the bullet go off and finds his brother there dead and carries him into the house. And then he has this image of what heaven is like with all of his brothers together. And then it cuts to him at his own home and his sons are playing and he's crying. And his sons say, "What's wrong?" And he's like, "I used to be a brother before." That whole 15-minute sequence is just heartbreaking. It's hard not to bawl your eyes out watching The Iron Claw. But then they, show a picture of Kevin Von Erich with his family now, and it warms things up. But to see everything this one guy went through with depression and grief and, losing brother after brother when his biggest dream in life is just to be with his brothers. It's so sad, but the movie is done so well. Sean Durkin, you could tell again, this was a passion project for Sean Durkin. He loves the story of the Von Erichs. He's a big wrestling fan. And he dives into this story and truly captures what Texas was like then when it comes to wrestling and the heartbreak this family felt through strong emotional pull and everything about this movie. Again, this is a 10 out of 10 movie for me. It's my movie of the year. If I had a vote, it's my best picture. I have my best actor. I have supporting actors in this film. Best editing. The soundtrack and score from fantastic. It's hard to find a flaw with this movie. And despite all the heartbreak and, tears that were shed watching this movie, both times I watched it, I left the theater saying, there's not much better than that when it comes to cinema. And it was really good to see that with a movie this year. Well, that does it for my 2023 rankings. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought of 2023. In my opinion, a very good year in cinema, really the best since COVID, making a comeback. Keep theaters going, obviously, but let me know, what was your favorite film of the year? What were your top 5 films of the year? What film disappointed you the most? Leave all of those in the comments. If you like what you're watching, please watch other videos. Hit the subscribe button or follow the social links down in the description below. And I'll be back to talk to you some more movies in 2024. Thank you, and I'll talk to you all soon. Peace.